You slice your finger on a kitchen knife. It bleeds. It hurts. You put a bandage on it, and a week later there's a scar. That's the best your body can do. Now picture a salamander. Someone cuts off its entire leg. The leg is gone. Not damaged. Gone. And then, over the following weeks, something happens that your body treats as a biological impossibility. The leg comes back. Bone, muscle, nerve, skin, claw. All of it. Rebuilt from scratch. Fully functional. And the salamander doesn't seem particularly bothered about the whole process. So here's the question that should genuinely unsettle you. You and that salamander share a common ancestor. You both have DNA. You both have cells that divide, repair, and rebuild tissue. So why can't you do what it does? Why did something that extraordinary get switched off in you? The first thing you need to understand is what regeneration actually is. Because it's not the same as healing. Healing is patching. Your body throws scar tissue at a wound the way you'd stuff newspaper into a broken window to keep the cold out. It closes the gap. It stops the bleeding. But the original structure is gone, and it stays gone. Regeneration is something completely different. It's reconstruction. The organism doesn't just seal the wound shut. It rebuilds the missing structure cell by cell, tissue layer by tissue layer, until what was lost is back and working. That's not a repair job. That's a rebuild from blueprints. And some animals do this so completely that you genuinely cannot tell anything was ever missing. The animal most people think of first is the axolotl. It's a Mexican salamander that lives its whole life in a larval state, which is already strange enough. But what makes it scientifically famous is that it can regenerate nearly any part of its body. Limbs, obviously, but also its heart, its spinal cord, parts of its brain, its jaw. Researchers have removed the same limb from the same axolotl multiple times in a row, and each time it grows back. The same limb, in the same spot, with the same structure. The axolotl doesn't scar over and call it a day. It reverts the cells at the wound site to something resembling an earlier developmental state and builds the whole thing again from the beginning. Here's where it gets specific and genuinely strange. When a salamander loses a limb, the cells near the wound don't just sit there waiting for instructions from somewhere else. They do something remarkable. They dedifferentiate. That word matters. Differentiation is the process by which a general embryonic cell becomes a specific thing, a muscle cell, a nerve cell, a bone cell. It commits. Once it commits, it stays committed. Your cells are committed, but salamander cells near an amputation site partially undo that commitment. They pull back toward a more primitive state. They form what's called a blastema, a little dome of undifferentiated cells that sits at the wound site and starts dividing rapidly. And that blastema contains the positional memory to know exactly what it needs to rebuild. It knows it's a leg. It knows which direction is up, which is forward, how many toes belong at the end. That information is in there, and the blastema reads it and acts on it. So why can't your cells do that? Your cells can dedifferentiate too, technically. Cancer is partly what happens when cells lose their differentiation and start dividing without control. But controlled, precise, targeted dedifferentiation of the kind that produces a new limb rather than a tumor, that's something your biology actively prevents. And that's the important word, prevents. Not fails at, prevents. Your body has multiple layered molecular systems specifically designed to stop cells from reverting to earlier states. The same pathways that make regeneration possible in salamanders are present in you. They're just suppressed. There are genes in your genome, right now, that are involved in developmental processes that built your limbs before you were born. They turned on, they did their job, and then your biology shut them down hard and locked the door. One of the central players here is a protein called P21. It's a tumor suppressor, which means its job is to stop uncontrolled cell division. It's genuinely important. You don't want to be without it. But it's also one of the major molecular brakes on regeneration. Mice that are genetically engineered to lack P21 show something that startled researchers when they first saw it. They can regenerate ear tissue. Not fully, not a whole limb, but measurably better than a normal mouse. The wound closes without scarring. New tissue grows in. The P21 pathway is one of the reasons your cells don't try to rebuild what's lost. Turn it off, and suddenly a tiny sliver of regenerative capacity comes back. That tells you something important. The capacity isn't entirely absent. It's suppressed. But here's the thing. Suppression costs something. And that cost is a clue to why you ended up this way. Regeneration is metabolically expensive. Growing an entirely new limb requires enormous energy, enormous cellular resources, enormous time. A salamander limb can take months to fully regrow. During that entire period, the animal is running a massive biological project that demands a significant share of its resources. For small, cold-blooded animals with slow metabolisms and long lifespans, that trade-off can make sense. You're using energy gradually over time to restore full function. But mammals run hot. Your metabolism is fast. Your energy demands are constant. And the evolutionary pressure on your ancestors wasn't to rebuild lost limbs. It was to survive long enough to reproduce. A mouse that heals fast with scar tissue and gets back to moving through the underbrush survives. A mouse running an expensive multi-month limb regrowth process is a slow, compromised mouse sitting still in a world full of predators. There's another layer that makes your situation specifically difficult. Mammals, including you, have an immune response to injury that is dramatically more aggressive than what salamanders deploy. When you're wounded, your immune system floods the site. Inflammation is intense, fast, and powerful. That response is fantastic for fighting infection. It's also deeply hostile to regeneration. The molecular environment that your immune system creates at a wound site is the opposite of what a blastema needs to form and function. Salamanders have a more measured immune response to injury, slower, less inflammatory, and that gentler molecular environment at the wound is part of what allows the blastema to form without being destroyed. Your immune system isn't malfunctioning, it's doing exactly what it evolved to do. It's just that what it evolved to do is incompatible with rebuilding a finger. You also have to factor in nervous system complexity. Your limbs are wired into an extraordinarily intricate network. The number of precise neural connections required for fine motor control in a human hand, the specific pathways, the sensory feedback loops, the motor control precision, the coordination with your spinal cord and brain, that's not something that can be reconstructed casually. Salamander limbs are functional, but they're not running the same level of neural complexity. Regenerating a simpler structure is a fundamentally different problem than regenerating one with thousands of precise connections that all need to land in exactly the right place to work. Some animals sit between the extremes. Deer regrow their antlers every single year. That's the fastest growing tissue in the mammal kingdom, adding up to an inch per day at peak growth. But antlers aren't limbs. They're bone tissue without the embedded neural and vascular complexity that a functional limb requires. Zebrafish can regenerate fins and heart tissue. Planarian flatworms are almost absurdly capable. You can cut one into dozens of pieces, and each piece will grow into a complete worm. But these animals are not you. And the gap between a planarian and a primate isn't just size. It's layered biological complexity that compounds at every level. Researchers are genuinely trying to close that gap, though. There are labs right now studying the specific signaling molecules that activate blastema formation, trying to understand whether those signals could be delivered artificially to mammalian tissue. There's work on the WNT signaling pathway, which plays a central role in how salamanders pattern a regrowing limb. There's research into manipulating macrophages, the immune cells that attend to wounds, to see whether shifting their behavior during early healing could create a more regeneration-permissive environment. None of this is simple. None of it is close to a clinical application. But none of it has hit a wall that looks genuinely uncrossable either. The MRL mouse is one of the most studied examples of why that's encouraging. It's a specific strain of laboratory mouse that shows unusually robust tissue repair. Ear holes punched through its cartilage close completely. Heart tissue damage is more limited than in standard mice. Researchers have spent years trying to identify exactly what's different about MRL mice at the molecular level, because if you can identify the specific genetic and cellular differences that give this mouse its enhanced repair capacity, you have a potential map for engineering similar capacity in other mammals. The MRL mouse didn't evolve this on purpose. It emerged from a specific genetic background, and that tells you the capacity is accessible, at least partially, through changes that are within the range of normal biological variation. What your body can do is already remarkable in its own right. Liver cells divide to compensate for lost liver mass. Skin turns over continuously. Bone fractures knit themselves back together with remarkable precision given how mechanically complex bone is. But none of that is regeneration in the salamander sense. It's maintenance. It's repair. The distinction is real and it runs deep through your biology, down to how your cells respond to signals, how your immune system behaves, how your developmental programs were set up before you were born and then locked away. The axolotl kept a door open that your lineage quietly closed, and the reasons it was closed are written in everything your body prioritized instead.